The biggest issues facing our nation and the Low Country addressed tonight. Out of control inflation. An historic Supreme Court ruling.
She says she won't support a national abortion ban without exceptions.
I do think she's a little unhinged, but my record really truly speaks for itself.
Record gun violence. Two candidates with two different visions for your future. Republican U.S. Representative Nancy Mace wants another term to represent you in Washington.
I want to continue the work that we've started. There's so much work to be done.
But pediatrician turned politician Dr. Annie Andrews says it's time for something new.
I think that the community is ready for a change in representation in D.C.
Tonight, you decide who gets your vote. Live from the News 2 studios in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, this is the first Congressional District debate.
Good evening. I'm Carolyn Murray from WCBD News 2 in Charleston. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Ben Singer from WCBD News 3 on your side in Savannah.
Tonight we are broadcasting to viewers across South Carolina's Low Country. Voters in Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties are joining us on WCBD News 2.
Beaufort, Bluffton, and Hilton Head Island voters are watching on WSAV. And for those of you following along at home, use the hashtag SC01 debate.
Before we get started with tonight's topics, the rules. Representative Mace, Dr. Andrews, you will each have 60 seconds to answer each question. If there is a follow-up question or rebuttal, you will have 30 seconds. There is no limit to the number of rebuttals you can make. When time is up, you will hear this bell.
Each candidate will also have 60 seconds for a closing statement tonight. So a card draw determined who will go first. Representative Mace, the first question is for you. Now, gas prices are on the rise again, sitting at just under $3.50 a gallon in most of our area. Food, childcare, and housing still high. Congresswoman Mace, in your recent political ads, you say the Democrats have sent inflation to a 40-year high. You've been in Congress for 2 years, so tell us what you have specifically done in your time to help South Carolinians who are struggling. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you. And the most recent announcement on Friday of the Consumer Price Index, inflation up another 8.2%. We know that wages aren't keeping up with inflation. And we're standing in Mount Pleasant tonight, just down the road. A 3-bedroom apartment here will cost you almost $5,000 a month, month to month. One of the things that I filed as a bill earlier this year is the penny plan to balance the federal budget. Spending, deficit spending in particular, higher taxes, all contribute to inflation. And the penny plan would balance the budget in about 5 years and allow for the federal government to increase spending for every year thereafter by about 10% or more once the budget is balanced. That is just one way that we can work to get a handle on the excessive, particularly the excessive deficit spending that our country's going through today. And even under Obama's Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, talked about inflation, how the Inflation Reduction Act isn't actually going to reduce inflation. So we need real legislation that can address the issue in the immediate term.
And a follow-up for you. Let's look forward. What are you going to do in the next 2 years, regardless of whether your party is in the majority, should you win again? You have 30 seconds to answer.
One of the other issues in addressing inflation is looking at the supply chain. I sit on 3 different committees in the U.S. Congress today. We didn't have a single hearing in my first term in office about the supply chain. The excessive costs to make goods and to get goods here, we're seeing that. We're now seeing with the marine diesel right now, prices going up and scarcity in marine diesel. That'll increase prices as well. If we don't address our supply chain, we are going to even take longer to get through this. We saw Bloomberg just a few days ago too say we are guaranteed to be in a recession. This is an issue, deficit spending, taxes, that both Republicans and Democrats alike have contributed to, and that we've got to fix.
Thank you. Dr. Andrews, on your website, you say we must focus on solutions to make life more affordable for hardworking Americans. So tell us, what are your top 2 solutions to help those hardworking Americans? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. When we talk about inflation and rising costs for American families, I think it's important that we're really honest with ourselves about the cause of inflation, that we are emerging from a global pandemic, and inflation is a global problem. And 2 ways we could really help families fix their bottom line is to lower the price of prescription drugs. And that's why I was so disappointed when Representative Mace has voted twice against capping the cost of insulin, and she voted against allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices and capping the out-of-pocket cost for patients on Medicare. Reducing prescription drug prices prices would be a very effective way to help families struggling to meet their bottom line. The other thing we need to do is to start making more things here in America. The CHIPS and Science Act, which Representative Mace also voted against, helps us bring more manufacturing back to America so that we are less reliant on the global supply chain.
A follow-up for you now. Do you blame the Biden stimulus plan for the current economic situation we're in now? You have 30 seconds.
Absolutely not, and that's one of the things that drives me crazy about politicians. It's not about placing blame, it's about solving problems. As a pediatrician, I don't have the luxury of walking into a sick child's room and just walking out and blaming someone for the child's illness. I have to solve the problems in front of me. So we are facing global inflation, and it is a result of the pandemic. But I feel the pain. I grocery shop for my growing, hungry 3 children, and I've been driving up and down this district, filling up my tank of gas, and I feel the pain, and we all have to work together in a bipartisan manner to find solutions.
Thank you both.
Turning now to a topic you both have very strong opinions about, we want to give you an opportunity to clarify your stances on abortion. Dr. Andrews, you are on record as saying, I support guaranteed access to abortion services up to the point of viability, which is generally defined as 24 weeks. That actually exceeds South Carolina's current law of 21 weeks, 6 days. Do you support any limit on when a woman can have an abortion? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, as a physician, I understand that abortion is health care. And I know that women in South Carolina will not be safe if we have an extreme abortion ban like my opponent supports. My position is the mainstream position supported by all of the mainstream medical organizations. I support abortion access up until the point of fetal viability, which is typically defined as 24 weeks. You are correct. South Carolina, we define it a little bit earlier, and that's okay. After that point, a decision to seek an abortion must remain between a woman and their healthcare provider, who determines that the fetus may not survive outside of the womb or that the woman's health is in danger. The last thing we need is politicians in Washington, D.C. and Columbia in the exam room. These situations are by definition tragic when women are seeking these services in the 3rd trimester. My opponent's record on abortion is very different than what she will tell you. Her name is on a personhood bill, which defines life at the moment of fertilization and would equate to a national abortion ban.
You. Thank you. We want to play a video of statements that you made in front of the South Carolina State Legislature earlier this year and during the public comment section regarding abortion legislation. Let's take a listen to your comments.
This bill is not consistent with established science, and this bill will kill women and turn doctors into criminals. But will you listen to me? Unlikely. Time after time, you deny science, you turn away expertise, all so that you can score political points and win your primaries.
Now, throughout this speech, you've described abortion as health care. Is there a point at which an abortion crosses a moral or ethical line? You have 30 seconds to respond.
So abortion is health care, and it is a decision between a woman and her doctor. The mainstream opinion that is supported by the vast majority of Americans is that women need access to abortion services up until the point of fetal viability. That is what we had under Roe, and that is my position. Unlike my opponent, who helped to write and voted for our 6-week abortion ban here in South Carolina, and currently has her name as a co-sponsor on a fetal personhood bill that would ban abortion nationwide with no exceptions for rape or incest.
Dr. Andrews, thank you. Representative Mace, you say you have a 100% pro-life voting record. However, you've been vocal about supporting exceptions for abortion when it comes to rape, incest, or the life of the mother. Is this a contradiction? And what do you say to members of your party who support a complete ban, no exceptions at the national level? You have 60 seconds to respond.
Right. I have been very clear on my issue, on this particular issue, both when I was a state lawmaker and now as a member of Congress. In 2019, I told my story on the state floor of the legislature about being raped as a teenager. At that time, South Carolina was working on a heartbeat bill that had no exceptions for women who've been raped or girls who are victims of incest. And it takes a lot of courage as a rape victim to tell your story and share that trauma. I fought for victims who who have been raped and girls who are victims of incest. I did that as a state lawmaker. I'm doing it as a member of Congress today. I was one of 8 Republicans that voted to protect contraception. And earlier this summer, and by and large, most of what my opponent says about abortion and my position is a flat-out lie. I mean, she just said that I supported and signed on to a bill that would ban all abortions without exceptions. That's a complete and utter lie. The word abortion isn't even in that bill. And I want to stand here today, Annie Andrews, and have you look at me in the eye, look at me in the face, and tell me, as a woman who's a victim of rape, that I don't care about women who've been raped. It's a flat-out lie. And the women here in South Carolina, I want to talk to you. If you're a victim of rape, you're a girl who's been a victim of incest, I will fight for you. I will protect you, as I always have.
Representative Mace, thank you very much for sharing something that, of course, is very painful to you and others who've had that unfortunate experience. We appreciate that. I do have a follow-up for you, and it is regarding your vote. Would you put your voting record at stake if a bill were proposed that would not give exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother? And you have 30 seconds
and
to
we can
respond.
add fetal abnormalities to that. There was a young woman in Louisiana recently who had to travel all the way to New York who had a fetus without a skull. That would affect her reproductive ability in the future. And so that was a healthcare decision for her. I would add that to that. I've been very strong. I've said I would not support any bill that would ban abortion without exceptions. I've actually talked to Senator Graham about his bill and some of the issues, the heartburn that I have over the details in that particular piece of legislation, but I have not ever voted or sponsored a bill that would ban abortion without exceptions. That's just simply not the case at all, and I would not.
Thank you, Representative Mace. Dr. Andrews, if you would like to rebut.
Yes, absolutely. First, I'll say to you, Nancy, that I'm so sorry that that happened to you. That is horrible, and sadly that happens to up to 1 in 5 American women are victims of rape. I have never attacked you for being a victim of rape. But how stupid do you think women in this district are? Your name is on a life at conception bill. I am a doctor.
The word abortion is not even in the bill. I mean,
Nancy, you are
I'm
the
sure
only
you can read
one
an
on
X-ray,
that
but you
bill.
don't know how to read a bill.
You are
should
the
be able
only
to
one
read
on
it
the
and
bill that
understand.
doesn't
It's
think
literally
that
part
is
of
an
the job.
abortion bill. It is an
It is
abortion
not.
bill.
The word abortion is not even in the
What
bill.
else is that bill
It's
for,
not,
Nancy?
It is
supported by all the mainstream anti-abortion
Dr. Andrews,
organizations.
I would like
the word abortion is not even in the bill.
Representative Mace to please respond.
Yeah.
Though the word may not be, the word abortion may
Yeah.
not be in it, if you would clarify exactly what that means.
Yeah, the
in
bill
real
is literally like a one-sentence bill expressing that life begins at conception, a value that many and the vast majority of Americans agree with. The bill does not
And when that
ban
bill passes, what do you think will happen,
The bill does
Nancy?
not ban abortion, and actually would be irrelevant now that Roe is overturned because Roe v. Wade has been overturned now. But it doesn't touch contraception, like you said in your statement yesterday. That's not even in there. And I was literally one of 8 Republicans this summer that voted to guarantee women's access to IVF treatment, IUDs, birth control, emergency contraception, Plan B. Everything she says is basically
Mace,
a lie.
Dr. Andrews, thank you for your comments.
Our next topic is health care. Representative Mace, you say that you know that a free market can provide a good product at an affordable cost, but the Department of Health and Human Services reports that some drug prices have increased up to 500% in the last year. So how do you hold a free market accountable to be affordable in 60 seconds?
Right. Well, when the government gets involved, whether it's education or healthcare, costs tend to skyrocket. Look at Obamacare. Since 2013, costs have gone up 129%. And just over the last year, the cost of health care insurance is going up 10%. So when you subsidize an industry, when you subsidize a product, prices are going to go up. One of the things my opponent mentioned earlier was about the bill about insulin prices. Well, there are only about 3 manufacturers of insulin in the country. There's really not a market to compete. There is also not generic insulin. And the bill that she's talking about would prevent generic insulin from coming into the market. What we need is more producers of drugs. We need to have less reliance on China manufacturing drugs, bring some of that back here to North America and the United States. But when you have competition in the market, when you have more producers of a product, prices will naturally decrease and go down, and that is the best way to address the rising costs in healthcare, the cost of drug manufacturing, et cetera.
Let me follow up with something you just mentioned there. So you voted against limiting the cost of insulin in favor of a Republican
Well, it didn't really
backed
limit the
bill.
cost of insulin. It was subsidized by the taxpayers. There's no free lunch.
When you've given your example of why you did that, but some folks would accuse you of that being an example of putting politics over people's health. So what do you say to those people?
Well, the legislation would also cost $11 billion over the next 5 years, or just over $1 billion a year. Very expensive, but if you were to open up the market, if you would allow more competing producers of insulin, prices are naturally going to go down. If you allowed generic insulin, prices are naturally going to go down. That is just a product of a free market. That's how competition works.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Andrews, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, more than 500,000 South Carolinians are uninsured. On your website, you say you believe that no one in the United States should go broke because they or their child got sick. So what is your plan to make sure that people in the Low Country have access to quality doctors, nurses, and hospitals? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, so as a pediatrician, I believe that every child and every person deserves access to quality, affordable health care. I stand at the bedside of sick patients all the time, and I talk to parents about how we're going to manage their diabetes or how we're going to manage their chronic asthma. And far too often, the parents have to stop me and ask if they can afford the insulin or if they can afford their child's asthma inhaler. And in 2022, no parent should ever have to wonder if they can afford their child's illness. The problem is we have a healthcare system that centers drug companies and insurance companies, not patients. My opponent takes money from big pharmacies. That's why she voted against the insulin bill, because she has big pharma in her pocket. And until we get that money out of our politics, our healthcare system will never center patients. And you know who subsidizes the care for patients who can't afford insulin? All of us do. When those patients with uncontrolled diabetes show up at the emergency room having strokes and heart attacks, we all pay for that. Patients deserve access to affordable medications.
And who pays for your plan, Dr. Andrews? 30 seconds.
I'm sorry?
Who pays for your plan? How would that plan be paid for?
So we need to focus on delivering high quality healthcare that focuses on prevention, and that becomes more affordable. We need to get big pharma and big insurance out of this so that we can focus on our patients and delivering high quality preventable healthcare, which is evidence-based and cost-effective.
Could you clarify how you think the government should pay for more options for folks, though? I think
Yeah,
that's what we're
so
trying to
some
nail down.
potential solutions. First of all, a state issue, we need to expand Medicaid in the state of South Carolina. And secondly, we could reduce the age of Medicare eligibility. My opponent and her party have said on the record that if they take power in November, they will slash funding to Social Security and Medicare. We need to allow more patients to join Medicare, not slash the program.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Turning now to the issue of gun safety, Dr. Andrews, you've made gun violence prevention the center of your campaign, but advocacy doesn't necessarily mean action. What can and what will you do differently to reduce gun violence in our community? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. As a pediatrician, I never expected to take care of so many children with bullet holes. But the fact is, gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children in this country. My opponent has an NRA A+ rating, which is more important to her than our children's safety in school. After the tragic shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 fourth graders and 2 teachers lost their lives in a matter of moments from a madman with an assault rifle, Nancy was the only woman from the Low Country who had the privilege to be in Washington, D.C., to take a vote to protect our children in their classrooms. I was so pleased when Congress worked quickly in a bipartisan fashion to pass a gun safety bill that Lindsey Graham supported, and I was deeply disappointed that Nancy voted no. She cares more about her NRA rating than she cares about her children's safety in school. When I am in Washington, D.C., I will fight for expanded background checks, federal secure storage laws, and federal red flag laws, all of which are supported by the vast majority of Americans.
Dr. Andrews, thank you. Representative Mace, you bought a gun when you say you felt threatened by vandalism near and at your home. You say you go to the shooting range for therapy. With recent mass shootings hitting record highs, is there any form of gun control that you would support? You have 60 seconds.
Yep, thank you. And with my opponent, with what she's done, her work in the ER, I can't imagine, I sympathize how emotion and anger, the kind of emotions that she would see from seeing children who've been shot or people who are wounded by gunshots. And just in Chicago in the last week, there were 50 shootings where there is gun control, the heaviest gun control there is in the country. It's not working. 17 people were killed by guns in the city of Chicago in the last 7 days. Over 200 people have been shot in the city of Chicago over the last month. 50 have been killed. 78% of Americans don't believe gun control is going to work. And to succeed on this kind of issue without making a real difference, without hurting the law-abiding citizens who aren't committing crimes and going after those who are. I've been a part of bills, bipartisan bills like the active shooter alert. I've worked on strengthening background checks by consolidating criminal data and criminal records. Those are the kinds of things that Republicans and Democrats alike can work together on and make a real difference. The day after Uvalde, I was destroyed by that. I was sitting in the carpool line with my kids, dropping them off at the school, and there were 18 families that didn't have the opportunity to do that. It is a serious issue, but we can only be successful if we work together.
Thank you, Representative Mace. Follow-up, Dr. Andrews, you support red flag laws and banning assault weapons. Representative Mace, you do not. Defend your position. You have 30 seconds.
So you know who else supports red flag laws besides the majority of Americans? Donald Trump. States that have enacted red flag laws have lower rates of suicide and overall lower rates of gun violence. My policy positions are based on data and science, not special interest groups giving me money. Assault weapons bans also work, and we know that because we had one in this country and we had fewer mass shootings. Nancy says she was upset after Uvalde. Then why in the world did you vote no on that bill that 14 Republican senators voted for, Nancy?
There's an assault weapons ban in Chicago, and 17
We are in South Carolina. We are not in Chicago.
South Carolina data, by the way, the vast majority of gun crimes, people that are committing crimes with guns illegally, are over the age of 21 to 39. One of the other things that I want to mention is I've looked at the data too, and gun crimes are huge. Well, China actually uses your research or gun research for anti-American propaganda.
I will give you time to respond right now, and you can use this information as a part of your rebuttal. You have 30 seconds to defend your position on red flag laws and banning assault weapons.
One of the things that I find, my opponent says she wants to use research and data. If you look at the data in children and gun crimes, the vast majority of those are teenagers between the ages of 13 and 17. That says to me we have a lot of issues maybe with mental health, with gangs, teen gangs. I know of 2 high schools in Berkeley County just in the last 2 months who've had high school students come to school with guns. We have a huge issue in this country. We've got to make sure that our schools are funded with SROs, the school resource officers, throughout the state of South Carolina, something I supported and voted for. We got to address mental health. We got to address suicides in this country that have gone up exponentially for adults and our youth over the last 2 years.
Thank you, Representative
So why did you vote no on the Mental Health in Schools Act?
If you would like to rebut, you certainly can for 30 seconds.
Yes,
Thank you.
Every shooting we hear it's mental health. It's not the guns, it's mental health. First, I want to say I support the Second Amendment. If you are a law-abiding citizen, I have no interest in your guns. I have an interest in a conversation about how we can get fewer kids and fewer citizens with bullet holes in them. If it's mental health, why did you vote against the Mental Health in Schools Act? And again, why did you refuse to vote on the bipartisan gun safety bill that Lindsey Graham supported? So every woman in this district would like to know why you don't care about our children's safety in schools.
I'm a mom of 2 kids.
I understand
a single working mom. To say I don't care about kids, that is repulsive and disgusting.
Children's safety in schools,
To say that you know what is not safe is supporting sex change surgery on kids. That's not safe. Supporting open borders and defunding the police and defunding the Border Patrol.
A little bit later. You can use this as your rebuttal. 30 seconds on the issue of gun control.
I have always supported mental health initiatives, supported our law enforcement, especially SRRs in schools. I support, as a state lawmaker, funding for mental health counselors in every school, funding for school resource officers in every school. When you get to Congress and you have these very large bills, sometimes they're a poison pill. Sometimes those bills aren't even funded. Sometimes those bills are just symbolic and can't even pass the Senate to get to the president's desk to be signed into law. So a lot more goes into legislation when you're voting on it and drafting it and amending it.
So what was the poison pill in the bipartisan gun safety bill?
Thank you very much. We are moving on.
We're going to talk about infrastructure now, and both of you will have the same question here. So Beaufort County is one of South Carolina's fastest growing areas. There are discussions and disagreements about how much land should be saved from development. So how much of this land do you think needs to be preserved or developed? And Dr. Andrews, we'll begin with you. 60 seconds for your answer.
Yeah, so when we talk about infrastructure, those of us who live here in the low country understand that we have crumbling infrastructure. And what's worse is we have climate change that, combined with our crumbling infrastructure, makes getting across this district incredibly difficult. I see the job of lawmakers to fix our roads and bridges as about the most basic thing we can expect from our lawmakers. Nancy Mace voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill, again, that Lindsey Graham supported, that is bringing $6 billion worth of investment into fixing our roads and bridges. If she can't work to fix our roads and bridges, then she might need to find another job. That would be like me as a pediatrician refusing to care for children with ear infections. It's about as basic as it gets, and I don't understand how you can't cross the aisle to vote to send much needed money to our district, our growing, bustling district, to fix our roads and bridges.
You want to weigh in on development or preservation? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think that we have to take a comprehensive look at development. Overdevelopment is a huge problem on the Charleston Peninsula. It is a growing problem on Johns Island. And the fact of the matter is, when all of those decisions are driven by capitalists, and we're not thinking about the cultural impact of development or the environmental impact of development, that we're not having a balanced conversation. I was just down in Hilton Head meeting with the Gullah Geechee people who are really suffering for cultural preservation. They need people to understand how critical that is.
Thank you. Same question to you, Representative Mace. How much of this land do you think needs to be preserved or developed? 60 seconds.
As much as possibly as we can, especially through land conservations, through land trusts. I've been supportive of conservation efforts throughout South Carolina. I have a 100% rating with the conservation voters of South Carolina. I'm actually one of the original founders or co-founders of the Conservative Climate Caucus up in D.C. I've been working on these issues for a long time. In fact, one of the first conservation projects I worked on when I was sworn into office was establishing the crab bank off the coast of Mount Pleasant, a project that had been worked on for almost 12 years. And we got a plan done in about 12 weeks because I realized really one of the biggest challenges we have in Washington is communicating between our stakeholders, everyone involved at the federal, the state, and the local level. And that was enormously gratifying to see us. And then by the end of last year, to see it in fruition, to see it out there, 60 acres of a wildlife habitat, a barrier for hurricanes and storms, was awesome. Regarding the infrastructure bill, that was $256 billion of deficit spending that we cannot afford, basically on a Green New Deal. And it's actually only $1 billion coming to the state of South Carolina, not $6
In the first payment.
So it's not. And can I clarify, because she's wrong on that?
You may have a moment in just a moment to rebut that. Another question for each of you. Charleston needs an estimated $3 billion to fight flooding across the city. That's a price tag of nearly $20,000 for every person living in the city of Charleston. How will each of you secure federal funding to help the city of Charleston literally and financially stay afloat? Dr. Andrews, you have 1 minute to respond.
We have to take flooding seriously, and flooding is a problem because of, number one, our crumbling infrastructure, and number two, climate change. But we are currently represented in Washington, D.C. by a climate science denier who refuses to admit
not true. I mean, it's not
so
true.
She's changed her
Representative
position.
Mace, you will have the ability to respond in just a moment. Please go ahead.
We have to get serious about addressing climate change. We have to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels so that we can combat sea level rise, air temperature, and water temperature rise. But as long as we have climate science deniers in Congress, we cannot get serious about that.
Thank you. Representative Mace, the same question for you. How will you help secure federal funding to alleviate flooding in Charleston? You have 60 seconds.
I'm so glad you asked. I actually just got over $100 million appropriated for flooding projects here throughout the 1st Congressional District via the Water Resources Development Act, where members of Congress can submit 3 projects for that particular legislation. I submitted 14 and got 9 approved. And so that was a tremendous effort. Oftentimes we argue over the amount of money we're going to spend on infrastructure. We argue about how it's going to be paid for. But at the end of the day, when that money is appropriated, I'm going to fight tooth and nail for all the resources that I can get back here in the Low Country. And that was a record submission. It was record for us, for anyone I think in the state of South Carolina, and certainly for this congressional session. In regards to the infrastructure bill, I know that you know how to read an x-ray, but you don't know how to read a bill. And that's literally part of the job. South Carolina, that's $6 billion, $5 billion of it is baseline funding that we were already going to get anyway. So we're really only going to get $1 billion of extra funding out of the infrastructure bill, a $2 trillion bill that had very little to do with roads and bridges and isn't going to help us here in the Low Country.
Thank you, Representative Mace. We want to talk about an issue that came up earlier, gender-affirming treatments. Representative Mace, a leading transgender health association, has lowered its recommended age for beginning gender transition treatments, including sex hormones and surgery. That age is now 14. Researchers say that it is unethical and harmful to withhold these treatments. What is your position on transgender transition and the age recommendation being lowered? You have 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you. I think that anything that is permanent and irreversible, like hormonal puberty blockers, those are irreversible. Sex change surgery on minor children, those things are irreversible. That is child abuse, and I would not support it. We just saw Vanderbilt suspend those kinds of procedures at their hospital due to the public outrage when the public found out about it. I read an article just the other day about Georgetown University teaching their medical students that puberty blockers are reversible when they're not. And there's so much that we just don't know. Puberty can be, it's life-changing. And when you give these kinds of drugs to kids, when you do these kind of permanent procedures that are irreversible, you can't take that back. And I've read stories of teenage girls that are 14 or 15, had a double mastectomy and then realized a year later they really didn't want to transition. Well, they can't take that back. So we shouldn't be doing anything to any child under the age of 18, full stop. Let them decide that once nature has taken its course and it's safer and they're an adult and can consent to those decisions.
Representative Mace, I'd like to follow up with you. What do you say to children and their parents who believe that this treatment is necessary for them, and after consulting with their doctor, they've deemed it necessary, but you are calling this treatment child abuse? If one of them were here right now, what would you say to them? You have 30 seconds.
Sex change surgery on a minor child is child abuse. That's something my opponent supported as recently as last year until a few weeks ago when we called her out on it. I would not support a child consenting to something that is permanent and irreversible. Growing your hair out, changing the way that you dress, changing your pronouns as a child, those are all things that you can modify later on in life and decide if you don't want to be a boy or a girl, you can change that back. But when you do a permanent irreversible operation on a child, you can't take that back. So you've got to have some guardrails.
Thank you, Representative Mace. Dr. Andrews, you voluntarily took unpaid leave from your position at the Medical University of South Carolina. You will be able to in just a moment.
Thank you.
You indicated that you felt threatened last year. It was the result of tweets from Representative Mace regarding this very issue. Will you please explain your views on this issue and also explain if you felt misrepresented by the Congresswoman's comments? You have 60 seconds to respond.
Thank you for this question. I'm going to start by saying that bullying children is never okay, especially when you are a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives.
I've not bullied any kids.
As a pediatrician,
I can't even.
As a pediatrician, it is my duty and privilege to serve every child in the Low Country. The attacks that Nancy has thrown at me and our children's hospital and vulnerable transgender youth.
In USC. That's a straight up
vulnerable
lie. That's
transgender
not true.
youth
not
in
true.
our community.
You're just going to let her make all these lies up on stage? That's
Representative
crazy.
Mace, just one moment. Please
They are
continue. You'll have an
hateful,
opportunity to rebut.
bigoted, and built on lies, and they are doing real harm to children in this community. Let's set the record straight. I do not support gender-affirming surgery on minors. I never have, and those surgeries have never been done in the Low Country. But you know when I do see transgender kids? I see them when they show up at the children's hospital after they try to kill themselves because of bullying from adults like Nancy Mace, because 50% of these kids think about hurting themselves and 30% of them actually do. So I have had enough of this hateful, bigoted rhetoric from our Congresswoman.
Thank you, Dr. Andrews.
If you
Representative
disagree,
Mace,
if you
have
think
30
that
seconds
sex
to
change
respond.
surgery on kids is child abuse, my opponent's going to call you a bigot. She also supports the prosecution and censorship of people online and throwing them in jail because she supported a letter recently by the American Medical Association that encouraged the DOJ to prosecute people who believe that sex change surgery on kids.
Who are threatening children's hospitals with bombs.
That's not. I have never once mentioned your employer. I have never once.
Actually, it was in my ad,
I have
Nancy.
never
Thank
once
you,
mentioned
though.
your employer or where you work, which, by the way, she said she took leave on September 23rd. She said she took unpaid leave. Actually, on August 23rd of this year, she said on Post and Courier's Pints and Politics that she'd already taken leave, that she actually, in your words, not mine, that she wasn't working anymore. She said that. So for 1 month, I think the taxpayers of South Carolina ought to know, were you getting paid and not working?
Thank you very much.
On March of last year,
Thank you very much, Representative Mace. I do have a follow-up for you, Dr. Andrews. Do you still believe that taking unpaid leave was the appropriate thing to do for your family and also for your patients?
Absolutely, because I get emails every day from security at my employer about the ongoing threats to children's hospitals across this country due to this GOP playbook of targeting transgender youth and transgender healthcare providers. I took a leave so that people in the public understood that I was not in that building every day.
She was
so
already
that if they
on leave
wanted
when
to
she
come
took
for
leave.
me, they would find me somewhere else, so that I didn't put the sick children and their families who are in our children's hospital at risk by my presence there. She has created real harm in our community by these bigoted attacks. Attack me for the policy positions we disagree on. Do not attack vulnerable children in our community.
I haven't attacked a single
Thank
child.
you very
I'm a
much,
mom of
Dr.
two teenage
Andrews.
kids. She took
Representative
unpaid
Mace.
leave after she'd
Thank
already
you.
taken leave.
We are
a
moving
month.
on to the next subject.
We are turning now to the topic of marijuana. Representative Mace, this is what you had to say in a recent interview with News 2 regarding President Biden's recent pardon of federal marijuana offenders.
This is a step in the right direction. I always want to give credit where credit is due. This is something that I have supported for a very long time.
You go on to say that the president's actions didn't go far enough. So can you explain what you mean by that? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, this is an issue that I've been very passionate about, and as someone who promised to be an independent voice and work across the aisle, this is a place where I've had a lot of success. We've had a lot of conversations with the White House on cannabis legislation and what that might look like in the future. So I was very encouraged when he made that announcement the other day. I have a bill called the States Reform Act, hashtag SRA if you want to tweet about it, but that would decriminalize cannabis. It would provide a regulatory framework and treat cannabis like alcohol, descheduling it, but also putting in some guardrails that would protect children and protect vets. In this particular instance, I'm a big fan of the decriminalization that President Biden is starting now, but it would only affect about 150 inmates at the federal level. There are thousands of folks that are sitting in jail and in prison right now on nonviolent cannabis violations, and those people too should be freed. And that's what I meant by that. There's still more that we can do for those people who are stuck in prison for doing no harm.
All right, thank you. Dr. Andrews, on the record, you've supported full legalization of marijuana, including recreational use. However, what do you say to law enforcement leaders who are concerned that full legalization could increase crime? You have 60 seconds.
So I'm running to be the elected representative from the Low Country, where the majority of voters support full legalization, which I support for medical and recreational use. But Nancy says she supports that, but her bill doesn't do anything for South Carolina. It kicks it back to the states, and we are one of few states who have failed to act to pass even medical marijuana. So I want to know why she voted no on the MORE Act. She had a chance to vote to move this agenda of hers forward, but she is more interested in traveling around to other states in the country like Texas and Miami, Florida, where she just was last weekend talking about her bill that does not help South Carolina. But this is just a pattern for her, that she is more interested in doing what is best for her political career, to take the next step for Nancy, but she is not interested in working for the Low Country. She is just a typical career politician who is only looking out for herself. I want to support a bill that would actually help people in South Carolina.
Does your bill go far enough?
I mean, also not true. I mean, she doesn't know what she's talking about, unfortunately. There's this thing called federalism and states' rights. My bill protects the rights of states, something that we saw with Biden's announcement last week about the executive order. He had a nod to that, saying that I'm going to pardon these 150 people, but I'm going to leave the rest up to the states. So there's a balance. There's a check and balance between the federal government and states as well. I worked on medical cannabis as a state lawmaker, something I've championed. But when you have the federal government government and states, you have to draw a line. And there are 47 of 50 states who have cannabis of some form or nature. South Carolina will get there on medical. I am very proud of Senator Tom Davis and the work that he's done. I worked with him on his bill when I was a state lawmaker.
But it hasn't passed.
And the MORE Act, I do want to say, I didn't vote for that bill because the taxes are way too high. We're talking about totally unaffordable. You're going to go, businesses are going to go bankrupt, and there was no regulatory authority with the MORE Act. And it's not going to pass the Senate. It has no chance of passing the Senate.
Let's give her a few seconds to respond, and then we got to move on.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that medical marijuana, yes, Tom Davis has done a great job, but it hasn't passed. People in South Carolina, especially people with sick children who have complex chronic diseases like seizure disorders.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
They absolutely. So we need a bill that will help people in South Carolina, not just a bill that you can claim as yours.
Okay, thank you both.
Let's talk about each of your positions within your particular political parties. Dr. Andrews, your website has no mention of President Biden, his administration, or his policies. South Carolina was a key state for his victory in 2020. Will you support a 2024 re-election bid by President Biden? You have 60 seconds to respond.
So I think the president has been a steadfast leader in these years after the tumultuous Trump years. I believe he has had some significant legislative successes. I will support the nominee from my party, but I do think it's time for a new generation of leadership. We need more new ideas in all levels of government. I think that my opponent would be really happy if we spent a lot of time tonight talking about Joe Biden or talking about Nancy Pelosi, but the fact is we are here talking about the 1st Congressional District, and we should be talking about Nancy Mace's voting record and all of the bills she has voted no on. There is a long list, and if people want a summary, you can go to nancysaysno.com to see all of the bills with citations that she has voted no on. That includes the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that includes the Violence Against Women Act, and that includes the bipartisan gun safety bill.
Dr. Andrews, thank you very much for that. Before we move on, I'd like to just clarify, yes or no, would you vote for President Biden in 2024 if he seeks re-election?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much. Representative Mace, you and former President Trump have a history. You were critical of his actions on January 6th. Most recently, he backed your primary opponent, Katie Arrington. That was in June. With that said, would you support the former president if he were to run again in 2024? Yes or no? And please explain why.
I'm going to support the Republican nominee in 2024, but first we got to get through 2022. I do hope, and I've said this repeatedly, that I hope that Republicans have a wide branch of candidates. I have seen so many folks coming through the state of South Carolina and across the country campaigning for other candidates in this year's election. I hope that we have a woman on the ticket. I'm the first Republican woman ever elected to Congress from the state of South Carolina, and I want to see a woman on the ticket in 2024, and that's where I'm going to be. That's where my cheering section is going to be. And I've seen a great crop of women candidates that are coming through that I think will run for president, that I hope will run, and we'll see them in the White House one day. I would love nothing more than to see that, but I'll be supporting the Republican nominee in 24.
Again, for clarification, would you vote for President Trump if he seeks re-election again in 2024?
I'm going to vote for the nominee no matter who they are.
Thank you very much. Here's a follow-up question to both of you. What letter grade would you give President Biden? Dr. Andrews, you go first. You have 30 seconds, and please also explain why.
Sure, absolutely. So I would give him an I for incomplete. We're in the midterms, which means it's not time for final grades yet. As I said before, I think he has been a steady leader, and he has passed some landmark legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, and the gun safety bill. We need steady leadership after the Trump years. And I would like to go back to what my opponent said just a moment ago. In the moments after January 6th, she said to a reporter that Trump should never be allowed to hold office again. Months after that, she's flying to New York City to film a selfie video in front of Trump Tower, and now she says she'll vote for him if he's the nominee. How do you explain that change in position over just a matter of months with anything other than blind loyalty and hyper-partisanship?
Thank you, Dr. Andrews. And for clarification, the grade I, is that a passing or failing grade?
That's an incomplete.
That is incomplete. Thank you very much.
To respond to
Representative Mace, you
me?
are able to respond first to the letter grade that you would give President Biden and why, and then you can also respond to Dr. Andrews' comments.
I recently agreed with President Biden on his move to get simple possession cannabis folks out of prison. I liked what I saw done on the burn pits. I supported gay marriage this summer and women's access to contraception. There are things on his agenda that I have supported in my first term in office, but I'm going to give him a failing grade. Look at inflation, look at the cost of gas, the cost of groceries, the cost of rent. Everything is skyrocketed, and he'll tell you that inflation just doesn't exist. And if we don't get serious about inflation, if we don't get serious about deficit spending in this country, we're going to have a massive recession starting next year, and we've got to get through it.
Thank you very much.
Let's turn now to the topic of education. So recently, the Biden administration announced a plan to forgive up to $10,000 in federal student loan debt for Americans. Representative Mace, will you support further forgiveness of student loan debt? And if so, how would you pay for it in 60 seconds?
Right. I don't support forgiving student loan debt. This was an executive order that may or may not hold up in court, may or may not be constitutional. He may or may not, according to Nancy Pelosi, actually have the power to do that loan forgiveness. And as I mentioned earlier, anytime that the federal government injects itself into an industry or a product, prices go up. The one thing that we should be doing, and I saw this as a state lawmaker, but we didn't do a very good job of it as a state of South Carolina, and the federal government should be doing it as well. But if any institution of higher learning or college or university, for example, is getting any government funding, we should mandate that they cap tuition for 4 years, or maybe if you're a fifth year, for 5 years for those students who are going through those institutions of higher learning, but capping that tuition rate and guaranteeing that they know what their tuition is going to be for all 4, maybe 5 years that they're going to be in college.
Thank you. Dr. Andrews, if student debt forgiveness isn't the answer, then what specifically would you do to bring down the cost of higher education in 60 seconds?
First, I'll say she doesn't want the federal government involved in student loans, but she wants them in the OBGYN exam room, so I don't know how you square those two positions. But student loans are a real problem. I have 3 kids who are in elementary school. My husband and I talk all the time about how much money we need to save for them. But if we relieve student loans without addressing the cost of higher education, we are going to find ourselves back in the same problem in 30 years. So we have to get serious about counseling our students on their options once they leave high school, and we have to get serious about holding universities accountable for rising costs of tuition. We don't need blanket student loan forgiveness. I was happy to see the president provide some relief for people who needed it now, but we need to go back to the drawing board and find a solution. Again, we cannot legislate in sound bites. We have to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work and solve these problems. That's exactly what I do every day as a doctor, and that is what I will do in Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
The subject is racial disparities in America. Black and brown parents often explain to their children that they might be victims of systemic racism. Do you believe systemic racism exists, and what will you do specifically to combat it? This question is for both of you. We begin with you, Dr. Andrews. You have 1 minute.
Yes, absolutely. Systemic racism exists. It is alive and well, particularly here in the Southeast. We live in the area where slavery was paramount. So many slaves came to the shores of America in South Carolina, and we see the ramifications of that 400 years later in systemic racism. So we have racial disparities across so many aspects of our society right now, including in healthcare, including in gun violence, including in access to quality education. And what my opponent's party wants to do is to stop teaching our children about slavery and about race relations because it might make some kids feel bad. But what we need to do is teach our kids about the full American history so that they cannot propagate the same problems in the future. We have to get serious about this. We cannot brush it under the rug.
Thank you. The same question to you, Representative Mace. Do you believe systemic racism exists, and how would you combat it? You have 1 minute.
Unfortunately, the 1st Congressional District is no stranger to racism. This is where Walter Scott was killed after walking away from a cop in North Charleston. This is where Mother Emanuel happened. This is where just over a year and a half ago, Jamal Sutherland was killed in a jail cell. They wanted to take him to a room with Wi-Fi so he could have a bond hearing, but there was no constitutional need for him to be in a room with Wi-Fi for a bond hearing. He didn't even have to show up. Educating our kids and educating society on civil rights, the Low Country, as much heartache as we've had, there were so many amazing stories of triumph from Robert Smalls, who commandeered a Confederate ship and gave it to Union soldiers, to Harriet Tubman, who came all the way down to Beaufort and saved over 700 slaves in one night. We have such amazing, rich history here. That's what we should be teaching our kids, something that they can be proud of, to look forward to, that they can instill those same values in the Low Country.
I do have a follow-up to both of you. Can you identify some of the organizations, if you have met with them during your campaign, and talk to them about some of the issues of systemic racism that they have experienced or that they would like identified? Can you name those organizations and describe some of those conversations? We begin with you, Dr. Andrews.
Yeah, so I am most intimately involved in this work, in my work in gun violence prevention, as the pediatric liaison to MUSC's hospital-based violence intervention program, where they meet young men who have been violently injured and develop a wraparound plan to address the root causes of violence. And through that organization, I have had the absolute privilege of meeting some amazing Black leaders in our community who have been doing the hard, back-breaking work of addressing the root causes of gun violence in our community. And it's a real privilege to do that incredibly meaningful, effective work that reduces the incidence of violence in our Black and brown communities.
Thank you, Dr. Andrews. Representative Mace, the same question to you.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about some of the organizations you may have met with during your campaigning that have identified the issues of systemic racism? And
Right.
can you name some of those organizations?
Well, civil rights is a real passion of mine. I have repeatedly worked across the aisle in my time in Congress. I've passed over 20 bills out of committee, over 10 out of the floor of the House, meaning I've reached across the aisle and worked with Democrats on many pieces of legislation. The very first bill I ever passed out of the floor of the House was a civil rights bill that I did with Hakeem Jeffries. I'm also the highest ranking Republican on the Civil Rights Committee on Oversight. And this work started when I was a state lawmaker. One of the very first groups I ever met with as a state lawmaker was Turning Leaf, seeing what they've done to young men to train them and educate them, get them good jobs, get them counseling. They had a 22% recidivism rate in South Carolina. The work that we see here in our state has been truly amazing, and sharing those stories with our community and around the state has been part of the job, and it's such an honor to do it.
Thank you.
A question for both of you now. Recent reports have predicted that Parris Island base will face the effects of hurricanes, flooding, and extreme heat. So the Marine Corps has announced that it is considering moving some of the bases to other locations, including Parris Island, because of changes in the environment. So will you support the recommendations of military officials to relocate Parris Island? You have 60 seconds to answer, and we'll begin with Congresswoman Mace.
There's nothing wrong with Parris Island. I've been there. They do this year over year. I've worked with South Carolina's delegation last year in the NDAA to make sure that Parris Island wasn't thrown into it like it was the year previously and put on the chopping block. This year we're hearing that it's about environmental issues, but Parris Island is the beating heart of Beaufort and the Low Country. We make Marines there, and I'm going to do everything that I can to ensure we keep its doors open. It's far more efficient economically and via readiness and training for our Marine Corps to have all of that training in one place. You go to San Diego, and then you have to go all the way up to Pendleton to do all the range training. It's a much more effective having that training here, and I worked very diligently with Senator Tim Scott and Senator Lindsey Graham and all of our members of our delegation to preserve and protect Parris Island. It also means over 6,000 jobs in the Low Country and over $600 million to our economy.
Thank you. And Dr. Andrews, will you support the recommendations of military officials to relocate Parris Island? You have 60 seconds.
So it's election season in South Carolina's first, so Nancy Mace is talking about Parris Island. 2 years ago, she tried to convince us that the greatest threat facing Parris Island was transgender troops. This year, she's up on TV saying that Washington is trying to close Parris Island. The greatest threat to Parris Island is climate change, and we know that because the Marine Corps has told us that. So we need to get serious about addressing climate change. Nancy has a Protect Parris Island Act that hasn't gone anywhere, and it actually doesn't even address climate change, which is the greatest threat. If we don't act soon, if we don't rebuild our infrastructure and get serious about climate change, Parris Island will be underwater in 50 years. So we need someone who is not a climate science denier, and we need to be honest with ourselves about what is happening in Parris Island. She is using it as a political talking point to score points to try to scare voters in Beaufort that somehow she can protect Parris Island from closing. Climate change is the threat to Parris Island, and she is not doing anything to stop that.
A rebuttal for you?
Parris Island has done a tremendous job with actually combating climate. I've been down there, I've seen it for myself. They're fully sustainable energy-wise. They can produce their energy. They have Tesla batteries where they can store their energy. They have a solar farm. They've developed a kind of gravel that they've used to raise their road beds about 2 feet above. They've done a great job.
Thank you.
This may be our final question, and the question is for both of you. What do you admire about your opponent? Representative Mace, we begin with you.
Well, I admire that my opponent has stepped into the arena. It is a huge sacrifice to you, to your family. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. It's putting yourself out there in the public, and it's not easy. I know that more than anyone. And when I ran for office in 2020, my car was keyed the day that I had a debate. I've had my house spray painted. I've had my house trespassed on for the second time this summer, second time in a year. The sacrifices are enormous, but I appreciate her stepping out and stepping into the arena.
Thank you, Representative Mace. Dr. Andrews, what do you admire about Representative Mace?
I appreciate this question, the bipartisan spirit of this question. I am tired of the mudslinging in politics, so I do like that we are ending on this question, and I do respect any working mother, so I respect that very much.
Thank you.
So you are each allowed a minute for closing statements now, and Dr. Andrews, you will be allowed to go first since Representative Mace received the first question tonight. So go ahead, Dr. Andrews, you have 60 seconds for your closing statement.
Thank you so much. So my whole life, I knew that I wanted to be a doctor and a mom. Now that I am a pediatrician and a mom, I can see plainly that our children need leaders who will fight for them. My opponent is a typical aspiring career politician. She will say anything and she will do anything to get elected. She says one thing and she votes another way. Her credibility is shot. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. Some of her former staffers were so appalled by her behavior in office that they felt compelled to speak out, and they described her as erratic and demeaning and only interested in being on television. And even her colleagues in the South Carolina congressional delegation did not support her in her primary. Joe Wilson endorsed her primary opponent. So we need a new kind of leader. I am talking to Democrats, independents, and principled Republicans who are ready for a leader with honesty and integrity. And I am telling you that for years you have trusted me with your kids, and now I am asking you to trust me with your vote.
Thank you.
Representative Mace, you have 60 seconds for your closing statements.
I want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight. I want to thank my opponent, Annie Andrews, for stepping into the arena. It is a huge sacrifice. I know that sacrifice very well. I promised when I ran in 2020 to be an independent voice, and making good on that promise has come with a steep price to me personally and politically. And I can't stand what has been made of politics today. Y'all just saw I went through a very brutal primary. I'm now in a general election running against someone who says everything about me but the truth. And this job, this opportunity, this first term in Congress and office for me has given me a purpose in life that I didn't know I ever had. It drives what I do every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I eat, breathe, and sleep the 1st Congressional District. And I want voters to know that I'll take all the arrows, I'll take all the attacks until you tell me not to. And I hope that tonight that I've earned your vote on Tuesday, November 8th. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you both very much for being with us. We appreciate this conversation.
Before we leave you tonight, a reminder to voters that early voting in South Carolina begins on Monday. It'll run through November 5th. Election day, of course, is November 8th. We want to thank both congressional candidates, Representative Nancy Mace and Dr. Annie Andrews, for taking part tonight.
News 2 will be breaking down tonight's debate on CountOn2.com during a special edition of To The Point with Riley Benson and political analyst John Prasini. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again for watching.